All right. Hello, coffee makers, not coffee takers. He is the master of cyber farms, Alfredo Benas Jr., and I, the people's chief, Dr. Joseph J. Miller Jr., and we're your hosts for the Cyber Coffee Hour. Now, the Cyber Coffee Hour is a product of Mount Vernon, New York, and we are excited to share our experiences and stories with those of our incredible guests. Our mission is to impart knowledge, enhance understanding, and cultivate a sense of community in the expansive world of cyberspace. Now, for today's show, we'll have a coffee chat with AI literacy consultant and co-founder of AI for Good, Olivia Heslinga. Now, Olivia Heslinga is a dedicated data activist and advocate for responsible AI development, whose mission is to empower the public with a comprehensive understanding of AI's potential pitfalls, ethical considerations, and the importance of data protection and privacy frameworks. Through her work, she strives to foster a future where AI seamlessly aligns with the needs of both business and society, ensuring its responsible and beneficial integration into our world. Heslinga actively promotes data rights as a human right in the digital age, sharing valuable insights on platforms like LinkedIn about critical topics such as AI's role as a new public intellectual and the importance of high quality data in building public confidence in AI technologies. Her expertise in the complex interplay between AI and data privacy contributes to the ongoing dialogue about creating AI systems that respect individual privacy rights while harnessing the technology's immense potential for societal benefit. Olivia Heslinga, welcome to the Cyber Coffee Hour.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So before we get started, just want to do just a quick catch up as we always do. First, Olivia, as I guess, just sort of want to know a little bit just how you've been doing. I guess this past week, how things been going on for you, and any movies you've seen as of late, or a big thing you're trying to do coming up.
Yeah. Well, it's winter time in Denmark, so I'm fighting winter depression.
Right, yeah.
But I'm looking forward to seeing hopefully later this year. So that's what I look forward to at this time of year in the Four Seasons of the North up in Denmark, Copenhagen. We travel outside of Copenhagen. It's a very flat country. But otherwise, last movie I saw was Substance with Demi Moore.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a very fun kind of thriller horror kind of silly commentary on the objectification of Hollywood and how ridiculous you can take plastic surgery, for example, to the extremes.
Wow.
It's a very fun commentary on that. So I recommend if you like kind of like silly horror movies.
I think probably the silliest horror movie I've seen was Scary Movie.
Yeah,
The whole Scary Movie series. That's probably the silliest, most foolish scary movie I've seen.
this was a little bit more yeah, a little more philosophical, I would say. It's fun. I think you,
Okay,
you should check it out.
gotcha.
I tend to trend on a Slither. Go ahead. Yes.
No. I'll just go switch to you, Alfredo. What's the latest with you?
So I'm not quite ready for the snow coming to Maryland. Apparently, there's a forecast in our area. I don't know if it's going to be the same as Copenhagen, but I was kind of prepping for that. I've got a snow machine I never really use. I'm hoping to use it. And I also just got some more salt because I apparently didn't have enough salt throughout this. I didn't expect to have any salt this year, but I needed several rounds of salt. Outside of that, man, just running the gauntlet. I had a little bit of good news. I got a new opportunity. I'm not ready to talk about yet, but I am finally back in the wheel with a decent employer that I kind of like, and had a little rough time the last couple months with that situation, but it's on the up and up, and a lot of back of house stuff for the show. So we're definitely doing ramping back up on our side, which is good to hear and good to be back on. And that's it. Getting ready for the Super Bowl. So I know the Super Bowl weekend.
Yeah, the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I know they're definitely going to be a crowd in my area. A few folks celebrating. I actually have cousins rooting for the Eagles, so I want to probably stop by there and see how they do tomorrow.
Oh, that's awesome, man. So I guess a couple of things I'll touch on. Like, so for one, like we're talking about the weather. Yeah, we're getting all these alerts about the this upcoming I guess snow that's getting ready to dump on us here shortly. And a present just like you, man. I bought since the last time we had snow. I ran out from my supply from last year, so I went ahead and restocked. So I'm ready this time. I got a whole bunch of stuff. Probably too much, but at least I'm prepared this time.
Well,
Yes.
Lowe's is giving out a free bucket. So that's what I noticed. If you go to Lowe's this week and next week, they'll give you a free 5-gallon bucket to store it in. So that's what I'm planning to do.
Oh, that's awesome. As far as for me, like shows, TV, honestly, so it's not exactly a new, it's not new, but it's new for me. I just started watching it. Superman and Lois on Max.
Mm.
So yeah, I think they have like at least 4 seasons so far, and so it's kind of carrying their story, Superman. Where so Superman and Lois, they're married, but they have kids, and it kind of showing that interaction, like the everyday life of having high school kids, and one of the sons has powers, or just like his father Superman. So it's just kind of seeing how their lives play out in like regular, I guess regular life. So it's a different aspect, different.
Like a sitcom superhero movie.
Well, yeah, but it's good. It's not. All right, I guess gimmicky. I say it's
Yeah,
more
yeah.
like a drama, but it's good. I'm actually surprised by it. It's actually pretty good. So I don't know. I'm probably like in episode 7 or 8 of the first season so far, and it's pretty good. And again, it's not new. It probably came out. Probably the last season aired like maybe a couple of years ago, but I just found it and now I'm hooked. So
Cute. I'll check it out.
Have you ever heard of Night Watch on Netflix?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so I just watched that. I just finished the second season of that one. That was the only thing. I guess it was kind of new too because they came up with another season. But that's
yeah,
kind of what I watched on Netflix, and I'm trying to watch what's it, Lioness. So if you see Lioness on
yeah,
Prime,
yeah.
yeah,
That was good.
yeah. Oh, it was good. Okay,
Yeah.
I
So I
only saw
watched.
part of the first season. I'm gonna restart it.
Yeah, they have a new season. I didn't watch the new season yet, but the first season, yeah, definitely good. Highly
Oh,
recommend.
okay, I'm gonna check
And
that
if
out.
you've seen The Day of the Jackal, I think that's on Peacock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that one is, yeah, it's called, I think it's called Day of the Jackal, or something to that effect. That one's pretty good. That's a good show as well.
Is that based on the Bruce Willis Jackal? Remember the Jackal back in the day? Is that the same
I
story or
don't
a different
I
story?
don't think
Okay,
so.
I saw a preview for it. I think I saw a
Yeah,
preview for it.
but no, yes. So yeah, as far as shows, those are things definitely to add to your list when you have time. All right, cool. I'm glad to do a little bit of catch up, and as we get started here, it's actually, I think it's our first episode of the new year, right, Alfredo? Like
Yeah,
first
yeah.
first new recording.
All
For
right. I'm
2025 is
honored
still
to
alive.
break the New Year's in with you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
did. We were really racking and stacking all the way into the New Year's.
yeah. The at least for me, beginning of the year, the flu had knocked me down for a couple of weeks. So beginning of January was really tough, and um, I think Alfredo too. I think he was down for a bit as well. So I mean, yeah, it was kind of little tough to get the new year started, but
My
yeah,
area's been going through these little weird stomach viruses. Noro, I think, was one.
yeah,
My goodness, yeah, that took me out.
yeah,
And then I have young ones, so they get that from school, obviously.
yeah. It pretty much just cycles through, right? They
Yeah,
just
yeah,
share it and give it to each other.
right.
So
So
yeah. But we're here, grateful for it, and ready to get started. I'm so thankful to have Olivia here with us for this conversation, for this coffee chat. And so, Olivia, I'll start with you. First question. You advocate for responsible AI development. What do you see as the most pressing ethical considerations that need to be addressed in AI today?
Well, as you mentioned earlier in my bio, I've self-proclaimed myself now in the data activist role. And part of that is just bringing to awareness the data practices of different tech platforms and how to uh, understand where your data is going, how it's being used, and in the context of AI, what it's feeding into, because that ultimately kind of spills into other aspects that we may not have predicted or may not have foreshadowed because we don't know where the data is coming from. We don't know how
Mm,
our data is being used. So it's
right.
important to ask these questions every step of the way so that people become aware and take action, be proactive and diligent. And we have, of course, regulations coming in, and we're trying to build more activism and transparency around this because ultimately the what feeds AI models is data, and that data is you, and how it's not going to affect you in the future or even in the present. These are the kind of things. And then the other big one, ethical question I would ask is, um, there's a lot of talk about what's going to happen to the future of work with AI, and as it stands now, a lot of these larger providers of AI models are basically stealing copyrighted material, not paying
Mm,
for their work of hard authors and creatives and intellects that have written academic papers and put a lot of money into research, those kind of things. That sets a very bad precedence to the future of work because anything digital that you put out there is basically commoditized and monetized by them and them only, then is there anything left for us in that pie? And these are the kind of things we need to have those hard discussions about, because we need to put our foot in the sand or make a line in the sand as quickly as possible before it's too late. Because once it's encroached in everything that we do, it's very hard to like pull back, and it's also very hard to regulate once it's become common practice.
Right.
So these are the kind of ethical questions I always ask during these conversations.
Okay, so given how can we effectively empower the public to understand AI's potential pitfalls and importance of data protection? What strategies have you found most successful?
Well, I mean, I'm not a AI postdoc. I talk and work with a lot of those people, so I'm learning a lot of in-depth expertise in this. But my journey started by simply being curious
Nice.
and trying to be like, okay, what is this AI thing about? And I stumbled into multiple rabbit holes of interest. And there's different ways you can take to become AI literate. Obviously, you don't have to know the whole gambit. You don't have to be a machine learning expert and be building your own AI models, but you need to understand the applications that they're doing, and at the very least where the data is coming from, because if it's your data in there, it might work against you. And if your data is missing, it also might work against you. And those are the kind of things that interested me about AI in the first place. And there are many free resources out there, and also videos and experts putting, papers out there discussing these kind of things and they've been studying this for many years. What are the kind of philosophical implications of what this actually means for humanity moving forward? So, I mean, I would say AI literacy is the biggest thing that anyone can do, because knowledge is power, and then you're able to make more conscious decisions that will align AI to what we want to see in the future.
Regarding the data literacy, do you have, so not postdoc, but do you have open source intelligence or open source resources for that literacy that you would recommend?
Yes, I do. I've actually gathered, because I was doing workshops and then I realized I want this to be available to everybody. So I have it on my website. You can go on aiforgooddenmark.net, click on resources, and I put the top 6 kind of free modules that you can go in and look at. One of them is, of course, AI and data ethics. And then there's other initiatives all around the world that is trying to help raise the level of AI literacy everywhere, especially in women, because we're not actually represented in a lot of these data sets. We don't have a lot of representation in the coding and the development of it. So there are like almost free scholarships and free courses for women, but also just available from EU initiatives and also global initiatives to raise the level. And actually, Google and IBM, and as well as Meta, they've released a lot of these like courses that you can take to understand how to implement and use their AI models as well. So there's a lot of free resources out there, and I'm just encouraging people to start that curious journey. And like I said, not all AI literacy needs to be so technical. You could just take a kind of a basic understanding of what it is and what it does, and that really takes you a lot farther than you think.
Are we at an inflection point where you might see a societal versus organizational imbalance between that research or between the literacy? Like, how do you navigate that in today's since it's an emerging technology? How do you navigate that?
Can you repeat the question again?
Wouldn't there be at a societal, like, how do I trust the organization that I get AI literacy from? Like, if you're going to a specific organization like IBM, Google, all these institutions, how do you navigate that AI literacy in those organizations?
Well, obviously, if you're going to, for example, Google Machine Learning Academy, a lot of their courses are free and you can get certified actually in their product. So obviously, when you're getting it from that specific school of thought, they're promoting their product at the end of the day. So you're seeing it from their lens. They're teaching you how to use their tools at the end of the day. And of course, it's good to kind of maybe cross compare with a different academy or a different certificate or a different course, because they might give you something different or give you another perspective. And that's a great question, because you have to be mindful that the education that you're getting, especially if it's free, has a kind of lens of the world, right? It's through a certain lens. So if you're learning through a technological lens, of course it's going to be very tech focused. But if you're reading from a societal academy, like a university that does socio-technological frameworks and ethical questions and philosophy, then you're going to get that kind of view. And I think it's good to balance both, because that's what needs to happen.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit more, right? You mentioned fostering a future where AI aligns with business and societal needs. Can you give an example where you've seen this alignment work well and where it's fallen short?
Yes, I took one recently. There's a Danish startup. They're growing very fast. They're actually trying to break into the US market. I think they're in a couple of hospitals right now doing pilot studies where they basically have an AI platform that monitors in the ICP, the intensive care unit in hospitals. Depending on the condition of the patient and what's being monitored, they can say, like, this is a threshold where the patient actually needs critical care, where a nurse needs to come in and check on them. And that's a great use of AI because it aligns with the individual nuances and the needs of each patient. And also it's hardware agnostic. So it can take in a lot of different data points like heart rate monitoring, or maybe they have IV drip or morphine drip or different things like that that can be actually monitored and used for the individual benefit rather than kind of a general standardized way of handling health. And the other side of that is there are AI models actually trying to replace healthcare workers because they don't have enough resources, but they're spending millions of dollars to train and put AI into a system and kind of force the work around the AI model rather than allocating resources where there actually needs to be resources like human care and
Right.
training so that people that aren't overworked, and that way the patient's quality of care stays high. So I always ask people this question when they come to me. They're like, "Oh, this can be solved with AI, right?" And I said, "Well, let's take a step back. Is this a AI problem or is this a bigger problem? Because AI can be a band-aid for a problem until we actually fix the real problem. Like if the real
Right.
problem is we lack nurses in this hospital, it doesn't make sense to replace more nurses with technology, or does it make sense to use technology to kind of hold the dam until we have enough time to bring in more nurses, right? And that's the kind of balance you need to find, because I don't think AI should replace especially human care. You need another human on the other side of that transformation, that healing process, not a machine, right?
How do you teach AI? Okay, you got it, Dr. Joseph.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I think that's a great point because, for one, when we look at AI, I think people lose sight that, yes, I think AI has a lot of benefits and how it can help benefit or enhance certain things that we do or certain applications or different scenarios, but it shouldn't be a full-on replacement for what we do. And I think a lot of people do lose sight of that. And, I mean, AI for what it is supposed to be a tool. Just like a mechanic, may say working on a car, he or she is using their tools in order to complete the job. The tools is not going to completely take over. It still relies on the mechanic to have the skills to use those tools properly in order to get it done. So I think it's really the same here. We utilize these tools properly. We have to make sure we have the proper education, understanding on how to use these tools properly. In this case, these AI tools properly and responsibly, so that way we are so in terms of, like, for the hospital, yeah, we're not trying to replace of course, humans or that human care, because AI or AI tools, robots, whatever you want to use, they're not going to replace what humans can provide. And as you mentioned, Olivia, having that human touch, even for myself, my mother, she's a nurse in New York, and yeah, you're not. I mean, they use different tools, systems, computer networks, of course, to support them getting information on the patients that they work with, but nothing's going to replace that bedside manner, for that human touch. That is, especially for maybe some real grim diagnoses. You don't want a robot just because they're going to do it with no feelings whatsoever.
Yeah.
You still need, like I said, that human element in that. So it's going to be very interesting how this really plays out. And Fred's up.
Yeah, I'll unpack and piggyback at the same time, right? You said bedside manner, which to me, you can't teach a model because it needs empathy. We've said this on previous shows too. In order to understand empathy and data, the robots today would be a hospice, unfortunately, right? Unfortunately, the data today points to, like, the lack of bedside manner, lack of ICU care, to your point, lack of prior diagnosis. What do I do? Right. And the empathy factor that you said, Dr. Joseph, how does this person receive treatment and respond to it? A lot of folks, myself included, I don't like being in hospitals.
Yeah.
You can't teach a model that history without watching the patient by the bedside and looking at how they respond to certain therapeutic care. I'll just say that much, right? Like some folks don't respond well to it. Some folks need to be eased into the treatment plan, right? How do you teach a robot that? How do you teach a model, regardless of how large it is, the network it is on? How do you teach that therapeutic response to critical diagnoses, right? To your point, hospice type diagnoses, you can't do that in the model today. And I don't think it ever can be taught because there's always a mathematical reason for human inference. I discern this. I feel this way. I know this person feels this way. I know they responded this way to certain pain medication, right? So that stuff today, I don't think you can even teach to an algorithm because there's no formulas for it. So that also plays well into the next question, right? As AI increasingly takes on the role of the public intellectual, what safeguards do you think we need to have in place to ensure the information it provides is accurate and unbiased?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question because even within humans, we're biased. So it's something we can't really get around, but it's something that we can try to mitigate by recognizing that bias. And again, I like to point out when we recognize that bias, it's not enough that we throw synthetic data in it to balance the model so that it doesn't have that bias that we're trying to get rid of for that application. There needs to be an extra step so that it mitigates the actual human reality of what's happening, right? For example, the biggest news around this was, I think in the US around Amazon, their HR AI model was specifically picking white men because that was the culture and that was the bias. And they said, oh, instead of like recognizing, oh, this is a problem, we don't have diversity in our organization, we should actually put more money into DEIs and try to hire for more diversity and encourage more women and minorities to apply. They just took out the model and said, it's broken. And that was the answer. And I was like, well, actually, it pointed out something that was super important for you to learn. Maybe like basically it showed you statistically that you have a problem here that probably should be addressed. And this happens a lot with AI models where like, it's not behaving the way we want it to, but making it virtually equal or virtually just or digitally unbiased doesn't mean the bias doesn't exist in reality and it's still affecting people, right? So then we have to use it as a mirror rather and not, outsource that chance to make things right and an opportunity to make it more fair. Because it's not enough to make the model fair, it affects the real world as well. And then the model's being fed this, right? So it thinks, oh, this is how the real world is. It's not.
Yeah.
So that tacks onto another must-watch, Code Bias in Netflix. If you haven't seen it already, it speaks directly to the institutions that write these models and remove the divergent formulas or diversity.
What's it called?
Code Bias, I think it's called. I'll put it in the show.
Bias.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes too, because you're 100%. You knocked it out of the park. The folks that write these models are, whether it's Ivy League or historically black colleges and universities, the divergence and the convergence of this data is predominantly written by wonderful white men, right? Okay, now the second side of the fence is, how do I contest that center of excellence if I don't have access to these universities and models, right? So that taps into adversity. You can't teach a model, like I don't have access to the institution, the center of excellence, or the peers reviewing it, right? So how do I have stake in this model that's affecting my community of practice or my ecosystem? Right, so that's something that's 100% received. That they dive into it in the Code Bias as well. There was a researcher at Google, forgive me, I'll find her name and put it in the notes, that also was fired for this same analysis from Google.
Yeah,
I know you're talking about.
Yeah, so
she started the distributed algorithm.
There you go.
Research.
There you go.
She's amazing. I follow her. She's great because she's actually bringing a lot of this to light and doing a lot of research, actually showing the effects of what this looks like and fighting for data workers' rights in this whole supply chain of AI. So she's really doing amazing work to build that transparency.
Yeah, and I think that's the
awesome.
ecosystem too. That's the ecosystem that we need to build, because now we can influence those data sets that are cognitively biased, like you said.
So how can we strike the right balance between harnessing AI's potential for societal benefit while still robustly protecting individual privacy rights?
I'm going to get a little technical, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys are the cybersecurity experts here. But it is also a colossal undertaking. I think business practices need to change to protect data dignity and data dignity rights, because part of that data dignity is going to protect our IP and our human expression in every way. The way we look, the way we sound, the way we think. is going to be monetized. And I get paid for that monetization in some form, or the entire economy collapses because we are just now data points and we're feeding into a model rather than the system and model working for us. So I would say, in the grander scheme of things, I would love that cybersecurity especially jump in on the AI train in a sense, because there are so many vulnerabilities, from the way data is being handled to the way the architecture is to the way the model behaves in the environments. And I can go on and on and on about this. Is actually why I started reading about, and I'll throw this in the show notes as well, about cybersecurity and AI and how they can actually work together, because you can use AI to be basically your red team and blue team and white hat and everything simultaneously, because AI bad actors are using this against you now. So it's become a very convoluted, very complex ecosystem. And if you're building an AI model from the ground up, every component of that actually needs to have a very good cybersecurity expert along the way in order to ensure that the model behaves properly and isn't possibly, because the thing is with these models, as they're self-learning and as it gets smarter and smarter and getting fed newer and newer data, it's going to evolve. And if you don't have ways to control how that evolution is, we've already lost to AI in many ways, right? Because now we're not able to track how it runs, how it's affecting your business or society, and more importantly, how the data can be polluted. Because for all we know, the data, I mean, you can also, prompt inject and also put a bunch of data into the model that is possibly fake or disinformation that will have a ripple effect into whatever that AI model is plugged into, or plugged into that specific AI model. Now I'm thinking the large language models, right?
Right.
And this is already happening because of the internet's being overrun by generative AI misinformation. So the news we're feeding may or may not be true, and that's getting fed into our schools, for example. That's teaching our children that this is the reality we live in when it's really not. And it has a huge societal implication if we don't mitigate it.
Yeah. So I'll take it first because I'm hyped up, biting the inside of my cheek. To give yourself more credit because you knocked all the pillars aside, you just destroyed all the pillars of cybersecurity in a real quick sentence, right? So you're 100% on, and we'll start with red team operations. The game is played backwards now with machine learning. Those large language models, they exist on a machine learning platform. The machine learning platform is an AI platform, collection of those same learning models, right? And they commence numerous operations, to your points, both defensive and offensive now. So the name of the stakes in the game is, can I train a model to do both and have a valid hypothesis or extrapolation of all critical infrastructures? You heard it first here on the Cyber Coffee Hour. Right? If anybody, don't cite me. My favorite saying is, don't fight me, cite me, right? This is exactly what we're seeing, and almost like a science fiction kind of play out, right? Because it's now went from municipality, and I've said this on other shows, to broader coastal regions, US and abroad, to now a global impact and a global generative AI platform, right? Some of these models that come out, they come out with the exact formula to rob a bank, shut the power off, cut the water supply, cut the food supply, and get after the cyber defenders that know how to mitigate the risk, vulnerabilities, and some of the operations. We say tactics, techniques, and procedures. Well, if I can get 100,000 Alfredos and Dr. Josephs in a model, I can now play chess with them. I can now countermeasure them. And I know exactly how late someone's going to stay up reading about this very scenario. So the thing that comes to mind is a TV show on Apple TV called Extrapolation. You should check it out. It's pretty cool.
Okay. I'm getting so many great show recommendations.
Yeah, I watched that. I binge watched that whole show on Apple TV in a matter of a weekend because it was so great science fictionally. They were taking on carbon credits in the energy sectors, right? And they did extrapolations throughout that show. I won't spoil it. The other thing that we have to check out right here in DC, and nobody's sending me a coffee check yet, so we all can get this in the recording. Camless in Washington, D.C. has the models you're speaking of being written right now. The threat models, the threat hunt and detection operations, and how do I attack a defender that's pretty sophisticated? Not the bad guys. How do I get around the countermeasures a good defender picks up? And lastly, I can't leave that statement without a book, AI Convergence. Pick it up, get a copy of it, because in that book, it foreshadows the upcoming extrapolations, 2034, 2054, also behind me somewhere. How we leverage the AI platforms to attack global infrastructure, not just the critical ones in the US, but global infrastructures and patterns, system design patterns that exist out there. So it's not science fiction anymore. It's becoming red team fact.
For your audience, I think it's super important that there needs to be an AI engineer and expert on any SecOps team, and vice versa. And MLOps, which is the team that builds machine learning models and the AI models, and then maintains it and continuously monitors it. There needs to be some cybersecurity experts in that entire supply chain as well. And I'm sure you guys know this more than anybody, but cybersecurity tends to be like an afterthought, I feel like. It's always like, yeah, we're going to build this. Oh, wait, we forgot cybersecurity. And then they have to backtrack. And in this case,
we're in a 10-year regression right now.
Yeah, exactly.
We're in a 10-year regression going backwards.
We really can't afford that. Like, especially with AI, especially how ubiquitous it is and invasive, and also how prevalent it is in a lot of aspects of society now. Because even without our choice, we were just talking about this earlier on Google Meet. Gemini was taking our notes, and we couldn't opt out of that.
Right.
And it's stuff like that that I'm like, well, where's my data right in this? I don't want this to be recorded. I didn't ask them to feed this into their AI model. What if I say something that may or may be used against me, or worse, taken from me out of context? And then, then you're in this gigantic lawsuit of defamation or God knows what, right? So it's these kind of things where like, whoa, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And why should it be happening?
I think that's why they wrapped regulation around it. Now, I won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but that's what I fear, is the extrapolations between all these different entities. Now we have legal on the docket, right? Hospitals, like we just discussed, right? Where's the landscape architect, like you mentioned, or the cyber threat engineer and the tech lawyer? They're not on the same team.
No, they're not.
Right. So if I'm writing a model and I'm red teaming it, am I committing fraud? Am I breaking the law defending against this model that knows all of the regulations I haven't learned, or all of the legalities, right? So that's the part that as a defender, I'm like, oh man, am I going to be put in jail if I defend against one of these models that says don't patch vulnerabilities? Because that's the thing, right? Like, to your point, how does it build these malicious data patterns? Right? It's trying to get around my sophisticated, say we patch every 30 days, for example. What if it says you don't have to do that? What if it makes the institution or the center of practice like don't patch at all? It undoes 10 years of cybersecurity operations, right? So that's a legality call, right? And then what if I go and patch it anyway? Do I get put in jail?
Right.
Yeah. This is why I think data rights is an important discussion to have across the board, because data rights actually does look different by definition per different expert domain groups. And we have to align on that first and foremost so that we can make regulation that makes sense, right?
Right.
100%.
No, definitely important conversation to have, and definitely looking forward to that as we progress and as AI matures. So yeah, we have Olivia Heslinga here on the Cyber Coffee Hour, part of the Live Podcast Network. If you're listening, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast on all outlets, platforms, and how you consume podcasts. So as we switch over, as we get to the back half, I guess the back nine of those golf enthusiasts, other episode here. Just learn a little bit more about Olivia. Again, a little bit more, I guess, personal. We're not going to be intrusive like AI. We stay within the guardrails.
Yeah, knows me too well. I
right.
Make sure Gemini's not listening. Hopefully, Riverside doesn't get the model either.
Exactly. But yeah, just know a little bit more about Olivia as we get through here. So Olivia, first, as you mentioned, you have your consulting business, and as far as with for AI, maybe could you like to expand on that a bit, and how that's working for you, and how you got started with that?
Yeah, as I said, I was super curious about AI in general. I've always been into tech. I've worked for a lot of growth startups in SaaS, and I think AI was a natural progression in my curiosity, especially now it's been so hyped up and it's everywhere now, and Denmark is putting a lot of money into it. And I saw an opportunity for me to be part of the movement for ethical AI, because as part of the EU AI Act law, actually it's required by anyone using AI models to have AI literacy in their organization. So that was actually a fluke of luck, because I wanted to be like, oh, I'm learning so much about this. I'm passionate about this. I want to teach more people about this, because if they know, they will start pushing for better rights. They will start pushing for better transparency, and they will start pushing for a voice on the table. And that table doesn't have to be technical people building. It has to be all the stakeholders that are involved. Most of all, the users that are going to be impacted by that model at some point, right? Especially right now while they're implementing a lot of models into the government. So that's going to directly affect how we interact with our government and get healthcare and get our education certificates and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really glad that this is part of the EU AI Act, that they're kind of forcing in a way organizations and cooperation with literacy groups and ethical groups within the university, so that there's more of a collaboration between academia and industry, but more importantly, a space for people like me who are not technical, that will stand up for people who are not technical and explain technical things to business people and business people to technical people, right? We need to make that bridge so that there's an ontology and agreement on how we classify how this model should work, what we expect it to do, what we don't want it to do, and how do we continuously monitoring it moving forward in the future. And representation is a big thing, as you know. If you're a woman of color, I'm a minority here. I'm not even Danish, right? So I'm even more far removed from that group. My data point in Denmark is actually white American. They don't classify, me further down that line. If you don't fit in like a certain category, you're just kind of pushed into the general category. And for now, maybe that's okay. But in the future, when AI models are dictating how my health is going to be handled moving forward, which is something they're testing out now, that might actually be detrimental towards me.
Right.
And it's voices like mine that needs to be courageous and persistent, that, pushes their way to the table. Like, hey, I'm here too. Where is my voice in AI? This is actually my blog title. Where's my voice in AI? How do I get involved? And there are luckily a lot of initiatives here to get people involved, but they have to first and foremost be curious and be diligent, because it's moving so fast, and they have to be more or less kept up with the trends to understand at least how it's going to affect them possibly, and a way to mitigate that. Like, we need a way to talk to our government or talk to the corporation or talk to somebody of authority should we feel that we felt slighted by this model. And there's a lot of that not happening. There's no way to get around the algorithm if the algorithm is actually playing against you. And half the time you don't even know it, right? Because that privilege is hidden.
Good.
So these are the kind of questions that I like to push onto people. Like, hey, how are we going to report this? Are you monitoring this? And of course, no one wants to answer this in a room full of people that are talking about the baby that they've been building for 2 years or however long, right? It's an uncomfortable question to
moonshot
ask.
project.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel bad about it, but it needs to be asked.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's definitely important when you're talking about, especially from like the government perspective, and utilizing as more. I think government agencies are trying to implement or infuse AI into different applications for different mission sets. Just recently, we saw the Trump administration, invest over like $500 billion to the Stargate project. So I mean, it's just things like that. Just really have to pay attention to, and as you mentioned, the sanctity of the data that for those data models, we really have to pay attention and how it's what's being fed into it, and the verification too, what's being fed and who's verifying it to check, and all those proper checks and balances in place to ensure that the integrity is being upheld. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And Olivia, I'm glad you're definitely on the side of making sure to try to make sure we find those answers out. But yeah, there's a lot more ambiguity as we kind of learn more about it. We see like the beauty side of it, of AI, but when you start go behind the scenes, there's a lot more things we need to really parse and figure out to ensure that all of these AI tools, algorithms, they're fair and safe for everyone, not just a particular group or race or whatever the case may be. So for you, and I understand your background with AI, but in your estimation, like what are the most significant emergent threats in cybersecurity today, and how should organizations prepare for them?
I think, because this is my expertise, I think it would be actually what you mentioned earlier, Dr. Joseph, the integrity of the data. This is ultimately what feeds into the AI models, and we've had multiple data breaches left and right. We have data brokerage, taking from one data set and then pushed into 20 different other data sets that might not have been the intention of that data collection in the first place. So, taking data also out of context can skew a model when it's used in a completely different application. And as a user of this, right, as a consumer, from our phones to our hardware, and our IP addresses and social media pinpoints, those kind of things. If we're not tracking how our data is being used, it's very hard to verify, are you actually talking to Olivia at the end of the day? I could be an AI chatbot. I mean, it's getting so good now. It's so easy to spoof emails with AI. It's even easier to spoof people now across digital platforms. And we have to basically rewrite how the internet and our platforms are going to be interacting moving forward, because, I mean, even in social media, they're integrating, Meta's integrating AI avatars that look and talk and act, and they're anthropomorphizing AIs now to be more human so that we can build dependencies on them, just as we have built dependencies on social media, right? So it's a very slippery slope on where we're going with this right now. It's actually very sad, because they're basically monetizing our humanity, and the only way we'll be able to talk through each other now is this kind of exchange between technology, rather. Like, even now, this is great, we can talk across the world to each other, but in the future, this might be happening with just our AI avatars. We might not even be behind the screens, right? And that's a sad
Oh,
reality.
surrogates comes to mind too. That's
Surrogate AI bot. Like, that's horrible. I don't want that reality.
So, Olivia, first, I want to say, as a cybersecurity professional, you need to give yourself way more credit as far as the technology goes, because in my mind, I'm listening and saying I should become less technical. The skill sets that you've already addressed social impact, geopolitics. These are skills that have to be trained to cybersecurity professionals. So you already dialing in the weaponization of certain platforms. Let's just be realistic. I hope I don't regret this in 10 years. You need to give yourself more credit to how you're regressing and undoing the challenges being technical. Because somebody in cybersecurity has to unlearn, yes, it's the platform, I'm going to use it this way. Yes, there was a data brokerage and a data leakage, I'm going to close it up, right? There's an inhumane aspect that you mentioned earlier that we don't have as cybersecurity professionals, because one, there's a sense of urgency. There's an alarm fatigue to fix that data set, right? Garbage in is garbage out comes to my mindset too, but we've been trained in that way to think almost not to be vulnerable. Not to ask the social impacting questions, not to ask how many folks are hungry on the platform or ontology, barring for Palantir. Geez, I hope I don't regret this in 20 years, right? But these systems are already weaponized in nature and a global impact, and they're not asking the empathetic questions of how do I use this person's data set? How should it be used? How should it not be used? How much does someone eat in the area? Right? How much fiscal responsibility is it to feed a family of 4, 8, and 12? Right? Those questions are
Honestly,
asked.
it's a big question to ask for any industry leader, any thought leaders as yourselves. That's why it's very important to have different people at the table talking about it, because they do give you a
100%.
different perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I'm more on the sociological side of technology, and that's of course relevant. But from a cybersecurity or any sort of, I will bring it up outside of where we work in the IT world. I will pose this question to your audience and anyone listening. We need to all be comfortable with uncertainty and live in a liminal space, because that promotes curiosity, it promotes acceptance, and it promotes new ideas to form and you to adapt. Because guess what? AI is adapting every day, and we need to keep up with that. So we're forced now to be able to relearn and unlearn quicker and quicker. Otherwise, we are going to be left behind. And AI, and I don't want to say it like this, but it does bring the point home. AI will take your job. If you're not constantly learning and pushing yourself, it will eventually automate you out, because then you're on par with AI.
Yeah.
And AI will never be able to replace you as a human, because it doesn't have a human experience. It only has the context of our data points, but it doesn't live a human experience. So if you cultivate the humanity in you, you will always be ahead of AI. If you cultivate a learning attitude and an openness in you, you will able to transcend every day a better level of understanding. And that understanding needs to happen, because you cannot solve a problem at the same level of consciousness it was created. You need to transcend above it to be over to look down and have a good overview of what is actually impacting it. I mean, everything is entangled at the end of the day. And I'm not asking you to understand how that ripple effect happens, but you can ask the people that it does touch. And then you have that conversation human to human, right? And then we get a better understanding. Okay, I didn't know this code or this data set affects this person. How would you know unless you've had that conversation, right?
Yeah. So I'll take it another level just before we take it down a notch, right? If you asked me in the summertime, right? I would say in the US anyway, I would say AI has already started taking most folks' jobs. And a lot of folks have been laid off. A lot of folks, you would look at the ontology, say any 15 to 20-year professional has to continuously learn, right? And that's been happening in the US for me, at least. I've been witnessing it in our area, right? Those folks that didn't have an AI skill set or may not have these social impact conversations have not influenced folks to continuously learn from those impacts. Job loss, regressions, recessions, imposter syndrome, certain access to universities, none of those are in the model. And so because of that, most of the folks that don't fit that data set have already lost their job.
Exactly.
Right. So we're over, and then look at the application tracking systems. You have to use one system, AI system, to counter those tracking and applications. I'm using one called Teal. Shameless plug. They don't send us any coffee checks yet, but I use one in Teal called Teal to beat LinkedIn's tracking system. So that's a whole new ball game. If you didn't continuously learn that this is what's going on, you might not be employable in the next 5 to 10 years. I'll say that, or 2 to 5 years. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. And I think the temptation, especially for business, to save money by firing and laying off people and automating as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at the end of the day, maybe you will save money, but what are the societal implications of that? You are giving AI a chance to learn and make mistakes, make biases, correct those biases, but do you do the same for humans? And that's the problem. They don't. Humans have to be perfect, but AI can make many mistakes. They can even have lawsuits against them. That's okay. It's AI. We're building the future. We can forgive what's happening now, and it's affecting directly the people now for the future that we may not have if we destroy the fabric of society and democracy. So it's like, it seems a bit backwards. Like, what a weird, what a weird
It is
dystopia we've
backwards.
created for ourselves.
That's another one, dystopia versus utopia. See, AI is trying to build utopia. That's from, first that's from iRobot, right? That's the iRobot parable. And then another film drawn from sci-fi, because art doesn't, life doesn't imitate art, art imitates life, right? Elysium. Elysium's utopia is up in orbit. It's all algorithmically ran while we're like salvagers on the planet Earth.
Yeah. I mean, the road to hell is usually built with good intentions, but the illusion of knowledge means that we're somehow smarter, right? But actually, knowledge without wisdom is detrimental to everyone. And I think that's what's happening. We have this illusion of access to all this knowledge from all across the board in all kinds of disciplines all over the world. Language is no longer a barrier and all this, kind of hype. But actually, we haven't been using it like in a wise way at all, quite the opposite. So this is only exacerbating that and speeding that process up. And so cybersecurity people who work in this that can actually put brakes on a rocket ship means we can actually shoot farther and faster, but we have a safety mechanism. And if without a safety mechanism, we're just going straight off a cliff, basically.
We become space pirates. Unfortunately, yeah, that's my favorite analogy. But that also piques my interest too. What was the first piece of technology that sparked your interest in AI?
Well, actually, my background is in marketing and communications, and I've worked with SaaS companies, so I had to make a technical product sound good to business people. Simplify it. What's my return on investment, my value proposition? What makes you stand out at the end of the day, right? And that very naturally working with algorithms, because you're working with Google Ads, Google campaigns, LinkedIn campaigns. You very quickly understand, okay, this is how the algorithm works. This is how information is found. This is how SEO is. This is how you have to build the website in order for the machine to understand it, not the human. Because you're trying to get the attention of the human, but you have to work with the system to get to the human, right? And naturally, it's when you work in tech in any form, you start learning very quickly. This is how tech works. And this is why I always tell people, go on and play with ChatGPT or Gemini and try to, get it to think, in a different way. Try to hack it, try to break it, try to see like what it thinks it knows and what it doesn't actually know. And this is, knowing first what it can do, and then more importantly, highlighting its limitations, or even highlighting a worldview that doesn't resonate with you, is a very good starting point to start understanding, okay, this model doesn't agree with this part of me. And I have to be aware of that moving forward, right? And also when this is integrated into my organization, is this a model that we want to support financially, but also like, is this model actually what we want to show in our data sets?
Right.
And when you play with it, just chatting with it, I think you start getting that idea, and you have to really start thinking outside the box, because it will push you, and not everything is correct. That's what I always tell people. It's not an oracle. It has, biases just as much as us. The data set is static, right? We
Yes.
are evolving. We are constantly soaking in information and data sets. And this is not, unless it's kind of integrated into a lot of ecosystems like Copilot and stuff like this. So now it has access to a lot of data. But until that point, you have to be very critical. Like, you cannot outsource your critical thinking. That would be your downfall, because
I
then you
like
will
that.
be manipulated by these models without realizing it.
Interesting. That's an interesting hypothetical. So along the lines of challenging the model, and I heard something too with the evolution. I'm gonna try to phrase our next question a little differently, right? What key challenges have you faced in your journey to success, and how would you overcome the model augmenting your challenges that you faced?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my, my biggest challenge is just getting people on the same page. I'm not even really working with the model. They want to implement a model. I sit them down, we talk. What do you want the model to do? Everybody says something different. And like any technology, it actually becomes more change management and strategy alignment first and foremost, right? Because once you get that kind of straightened out, then you can actually pick the right model and the right technology to tackle the right problem. So it's a lot of problem formulation. It's a lot of sitting down and understanding where everyone's pain points are, how their work process actually works, and where can technology enhance or streamline an area of friction rather than replacing a whole department, for example, right? Because that's not what I like to promote. I'm there to help, like, hey, we can actually make your work a little bit easier so that you can have more human interaction with your employee, with your management, with your customers, and like actually make this a nice human experience rather.
When you say, so how would you say if it sounds like there's a definite learning curve with influencing the social aspect of it. But what if there's a model, for example, I'll use us as a, what if there's a model that says Dr. Joseph and I are not cybersecurity experts, that we're actually imposters, or we suffer from imposter syndrome in this field? How would you overcome that on your side in the AI field?
Well, I think everyone has an imposter syndrome in one area that they feel weak in, right? I also have this sometimes when I'm up against postdocs that actually are writing machine model learning algorithms. That's like next level technical that I don't want to touch too much. But I think if you come in with a curious mind and you're humble about it, I think everyone needs to be humble, because AI is not a static thing, right? It's constantly evolving.
Right.
And this is what I mean by everyone needs to be comfortable in a liminal state of uncertainty, because that uncomfortableness, as hard as it is, because it's never black and white, especially with AI, it's a social technological phenomenon that will be evolving with us. So then I push on to people, what are you feeding the AI model? What do you want to feed the AI model? Right. And people were telling me, I tell people all the time, like, what you're putting on social media is going to resonate now for perpetuity.
Yeah.
Do you want to show the best of the human experience and be nice and considerate and have good manners and try to reach out and be curious, building empathy towards the person across the screen that doesn't share the same worldview? Or do we want to polarize the internet, which means we're polarizing the models and making that part of our entire fabric of society and what we're plugging into at the end of the
Right.
day, right? So it's actually, like you said, we're regressing back to something as simple as, hey, what happened to manners?
Yeah.
Just because you're on the other side of the screen doesn't mean I have to treat you like a horrible person. We're still people at the end of the day.
Right.
Bingo. Tapping into that humanity. I love it. And now, my favorite question, our favorite question of the show, that brings me back to humanity as well. What is your favorite coffee preference that helps you get through your day?
I've been very spoiled. I grew up on the big island of Hawaii. We have Kona coffee, some of the best, delicious coffee
Kona.
in the world. It has this amazing chocolate grounded taste that hits the back of your throat. That's my favorite coffee, but unfortunately, that's very far away from me in Denmark, and I only get it when I go home and see my family.
You got to tell them to ship it to you.
Yeah. I actually was back in Texas saying hi to my sister, and I told my mom to bring like a whole suitcase full
Right.
of Kona coffee. But if you have a chance to try it, I highly recommend.
Yes.
So I'm experimenting with blends now. So I know, and we've had a number of guests talk about Jamaican Mountain Blue, right? Coffee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, this
now,
I haven't tried.
yeah, see, this is why we have this show right here.
Blue. Blue
This is
Mountain
the real
Coffee.
reason
Blue
you wanted
Mountain.
to do the podcast.
Right. This is the source of our intelligence feed. No. Blue Mountain Coffee and Kona Blend Espresso. If they haven't done it, you heard it here
You
first.
have to Kona.
I'm definitely, yes, I did a paper on it actually.
No, you did not.
Yeah, I did a paper on the coffee weevil. I think it's a coffee bean weevil was trying to destroy the Kona coffee industry and how to mitigate that bug.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
very
So
specific.
and because of that, I actually tried it for the first time, and I love chocolate. So that's a I love chocolate and coffee blend. So I want to blend the two eventually.
Okay, yeah, there you go. What
So-
about you, Dr. Benson?
Oh, for me, yeah, definitely love Blue Mountain Coffee. But like for my, I guess my everyday driver, I have my Nespresso machine here at home. So I'm going through the different pods, Nespresso machine. I used to, I guess when I started out, I was using a Keurig, but Keurig to me is just like really a kind of watered down.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beginner stage coffee as you're trying to work through. But no, Nespresso. When I got hit to Nespresso, that's a whole different level for me. So but that, and then if I'm out and about, if I'm going to coffee shops, I usually would get like an Americano, just black. I like to enjoy the natural flavors of it. But yeah, I like more like the mom and pop coffee shops as opposed to like Dunkin' and Starbucks. That's more of, if I'm in a pinch, I like to try out the local, especially black owned shops. I like to try them out.
Yeah, support small business.
Yeah, absolutely.
The franchises are just a step above gas station coffee, in my opinion. Not to knock any of them, but I've done that assessment too. The local ones that don't get really highlighted, or if you don't see them like in a farmer's market, you really start to not appreciate Dunkin' anymore because these coffees are so much better than Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah. So Olivia, if you could have any superpower to help you in cybersecurity, what would it be and why?
Honestly, I would like a way to build a very complicated architecture so that it would constantly never be penetrable. It's like an evolving network, basically.
Yeah.
Imagine a network that constantly evolves. Then everything that it's built upon is constantly impenetrable. But that would be like that's like next level.
It exists. It
That would never
exists in
happen.
the private cloud, which you
An
described.
innovative machine learning network. That would be so cool.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
like it.
And lastly, last question we have for you. What are some of like your hobbies, interests, recreational activities that you enjoy outside of work?
Yeah. I love music and I love art, but especially music. I was just saying earlier, I'm going to a reggae concert. It's going to be
Nice.
starting in an hour, actually. So I'm excited. It's been a while since I've heard reggae. It's not very big here in Denmark, but I like all kinds of music. I just love being around people and dancing and, feeling bodies everywhere, like being human.
That's awesome. I know that resonates with me because I'm Jamaican, and so we met for me growing up listening to reggae. My mom from
Yeah,
Kingston, my
it's a big
father.
genre in Hawaii also.
Oh yeah, my father from St. Elizabeth. So, yeah, that's part of my bloodline, my culture. So yeah, so so when you said that, I was like, oh wow, okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
Here we go. Challenge accepted. I don't know enough about reggae. Let's blend both.
Yeah, and I'm actually learning reggaeton dancing too. Right now.
Nice.
Nice.
So I'm getting really into it again. I'm like, yeah, this is nice because it's been a while. It's like I said, it doesn't really. This is very far north. They're more into like heavy metal, which is also fun, but not
Yeah.
not reggae. It's
Right.
not the island vibe,
Can you drop us a few recommendations and we'll put them in the show notes?
I will. I'll write you some recommendations. I'll give you some Hawaiian artists.
Nice.
Just to
Nice.
kind of mix it
Yeah.
up.
Well, Olivia, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Cyber Coffee Hour. Definitely, yeah, you're our first guest for 2025, so this is actually
I'm
extra special.
honored.
Yep. Glad
So
to have
before
you.
we go, if anything you want to share with our guests before we head out?
Yes, I encourage everyone to start their AI literacy journey. And it
Yes.
doesn't have to be so complicated. It could be just playing around with AI and trying to figure out where you stand in your respective field, and maybe use AI to learn a new field. I think curiosity is going to be the biggest asset moving forward with AI.
Well said. Well said.
Yep,
And
yep.
thank you. And I thank you for those listening and watching. Join us for another episode of the Cyber Coffee Hour, part of the Alive Podcast Network. If you enjoyed this episode, explore more engaging content in the Alive Podcast Network app. By supporting this podcast and nearly 100 other Black hosted shows, you can enjoy ad-free listening while contributing to a diverse range of voices in the podcasting space. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more insightful conversations with you in our next episode. So until then, keep brewing those ideas and stay curious about cybersecurity. All right, that's it. It's a wrap. We out of here. Peace.
Thank you.